Hey guys, this is Miss Harlequin, and in today's lesson, we are going to be analyzing how an author's tone is based on their word choice. So we have two learning goals for this lesson. One is that we want to be able to determine the tone of a passage, and the second is that we want to be able to support our analysis of tone with text evidence. All right, so before we talk about tone, we actually need to review connotation versus denotation, because when we look at the tone, we do want to focus on word choice, and one of the ways that you focus on word choice is by analyzing the connotation of words, and of course you have to know the denotation of words in order to talk about word choices. So denotation, when you hear the word denotation, remember you're always supposed to think about the D for dictionary, because the denotation is the exact meaning of the word, what you would find in the dictionary. So the denotation of skinny is very thin. And now the connotation of a word is the added meaning, the emotions that are associated with it, the context from real life that is associated with it, the way the word is usually used. And so the connotation is always either a positive connotation, a negative connotation, or it could be neutral, where it's just doesn't go one way or the other. It doesn't really have strong emotion attached to it. So a negative connotation would be skinny. Skinny suggests that somebody is too thin. But if you used a synonym for skinny, like the word slender, slender also means very thin, but it has a more positive connotation. Saying that somebody is slender, you're suggesting that they're thin in an attractive way. All right, so now tone is the attitude that a writer takes toward the topic. It's how the writer feels about the topic that they're writing about. And you usually express your attitude towards something through the words that you use to talk about that topic, the types of details you use to talk about that topic. And so, as a reader, if we want to determine what the author's tone is, we have to pay attention to the way the author talks about that topic, the way they describe it, the types of words they use, the types of details that they include. In other words, the tone is not what you say. It's not what you're talking about. It's not the topic. It's the way that you talk about it. It's how you say it. And tone is also what is used to create mood. So again, the tone tells you how an author feels about something through their word choice. And mood is the reader. It's how the reader feels about something. So that's also based on word choice. It's based on the types of details. However, the tone and the mood do not have to be the exact same thing. An author could hate the topic they're describing and have a very negative tone towards it, but the mood that they're creating could be another descriptive word. They could hate what they're describing and yet create a mysterious mood or a frightening mood or a happy mood. Even if you hate something, you could still create a happy mood. All right, so textbooks, which we all have to read at some point, they're usually written with an objective tone. They just include facts, they include reasonable explanations, but there aren't really strong word choices, strong adjectives, or really any kind of author's perspective. In fact, if you have a perspective from the author in your textbook, that's usually a sign that it's probably not a good textbook, because the whole purpose of a textbook is just to give you basic facts, to give you information. You want the tone of a textbook to be matter of fact, to be neutral. Now, on the other hand, fiction and personal essays are usually written with a subjective tone. Subjective is the opposite of objective. Objective has no real emotions or opinions attached to it. Subjective is all about your personal experience, the way you feel, your attitude, your perspective. So a subjective tone uses words that describe feelings, making judgments, opinions, and the details are likely to include experiences, senses, feelings, and thoughts. All right, so let's practice identifying tone with this sample passage. Sometimes these things would make mother and father really angry, and they would shout at me, or they would shout at each other. Sometimes father would say, "Christopher, if you do not behave, I swear I shall knock the living daylights out of you." Or mother would say, Jesus, Christopher, I am seriously considering putting you in a home. All right, so what is the tone of this passage? To identify the tone, I want to look at the way the author is describing this topic. But first, I want to make sure that I get the gist of what this passage was talking about. That's always my first step whenever I read anything. So here I can see that the narrator is talking about his mother and father. They're angry. He's telling us how sometimes they would shout at him. He gives us examples of what the mother and father would say, like the father would threaten to beat him, and the mother would threaten to give him away, put him into an orphanage. Now, the topic itself is kind of upsetting. Nobody likes to think about their parents treating a kid this way. But is that the author's tone? Is the author upset? Is this a negative tone? Well, again, let me look at the word choices. Are there really strong adjectives or emotions used to describe the situation? All right, the mother and father were really angry. All right, there's an emotion that they're angry, but this could just be factual. He's just telling us what the parents are feeling. They would shout at me. Okay, how would they shout at him? I don't see any descriptive words telling me how they would shout. Or they would shout at each other. Again, this is just factual. Sometimes father would say, all right, again, this is just straight facts of what the father would say. And again, here, straight facts of what the mother would say. There's no real language here to show how the author feels. And so even though the topic is upsetting, the author is just using a neutral tone. And once again, writing doesn't really work here. Now, when I think about how this makes me feel, the mood that it's creating, the mood is very different. When I look at this passage, it's clearly upsetting to me. It's a very depressing mood. And that comes through the types of details that are being described. However, because there isn't very strong word choice, the author is not developing a tone. You cannot tell how the author feels about what's happening. I can assume that the author was probably upset by this situation. Again, nobody wants their parents to treat them this way. But from the way the author's telling the story, you can't get that. Okay. We're going to practice a little bit more. We're going to look at different statements describing a shabby apartment, and each of the different statements is going to reveal a certain tone. One of the statements is going to show an optimistic tone. One of them is going to be bitter. One is going to be tolerant. Another is going to be sentimental. And then we'll have humorous and objective. Now, before we actually look at the statements, I just want to make sure that we all know what each of those words mean. Because if we don't know what they mean, we're not going to be able to identify the tone. Optimistic, we know from class, is hopeful and confident about the future. When you're bitter about something, you're angry or hurt or resentful because of a previous bad treatment. When you tolerate something or you're tolerant, you are willing to allow the existence of opinions or behavior that you don't necessarily agree with. So you're willing to accommodate other people's opinions. You tolerate it. When you're sentimental, you feel tenderness and sadness and nostalgia, usually for something that you feel positive about, good memories. We know humorous is just another word for funny, laughter. And when you are objective, we talked about that, it's neutral. You're not being influenced by any personal feelings. You're just representing the facts, like a textbook. All right, so this place may be shabby, but since both of my children are born while we lived here, it has a special place in my heart. Special place in my heart shows a sentimental tone. It expresses tender emotions. You feel nostalgia for this place. This isn't the greatest apartment in the world, but it's not really that bad. Not really that bad shows that you are tolerating it. You're accepting the situation even though you recognize that it could be better. You're putting up with it. If only there were some decent jobs out there, I wouldn't be reduced to living in this miserable dump. Miserable dump, reduced to living, are the word choices that show that this writer feels bitter about the apartment. He's in a situation that he resents. The situation is that he has to live in this miserable dump, and he's not happy about it. All right, so let's now do a little guided practice. I'm going to reveal the 3 following scenarios, and I'm going to ask you to identify which tone it represents. And we only have 3 word choices left. It's either going to be optimistic, humorous, or objective. This place does need some repairs, but I'm sure the landlord will be making improvements sometime soon. Okay, if you said that the tone is optimistic, then you would be right. We're looking at word choices where he says, will be making improvements sometime soon. So he's looking to the future, he's looking on the bright side of things. All right, number 2. When we move away, we're planning to release 300 cockroaches and 2 mice so we can leave the place exactly as we found it. Okay, if you said that this is humorous, you would be correct. The writer claims that he's going to get revenge on the landlord by returning it to the terrible apartment, but the terrible state the apartment was in when he first moved in. However, who is really going to get 300 cockroaches and 2 mice and put them back into an apartment? I'm sure there might not have even really been 300 cockroaches. It seems like a little bit of hyperbole. So you can tell that he's probably joking around. Finally, this is the apartment we live in. It provides shelter. All right, so hopefully you realize that the only choice left was objective. Now, we know that it's objective because the writer is not expressing any feelings about the apartment. He's simply stating facts. This is the apartment, we live in it, it gives us shelter. No feelings whatsoever, no descriptive words, no emotions. All right, some final thoughts on identifying tone. When you are looking at a passage and you want to figure out the tone, these guiding questions can be a good way to kind of work your way through it. Think about what the passage's subject is, who's the audience, try to get the gist. Think about what you think the most important words in the passage are, looking for key words, key adjectives, adverbs, descriptive phrases, and then think about the connotation. What kind of connotation or associations do these words or phrases have? Think about the general feeling that the passage's images create. Look for any hints that the narrator or the speaker does not really mean everything he or she is saying, like the releasing of the 300 cockroaches. Does the narrator or the speaker make any jokes? Are they lighthearted jokes? Are they bitter? Are they sarcastic? And if the narrator or the speaker were speaking aloud, try to imagine what tone of voice you think he or she would be using.